You're listening to the Business Wealth Impact Podcast, your source for empowering information and cutting-edge ideas from the world's top minds. I'm your host, Jean Amlour, founder of seven-figure coaching company, Jean Amlour International. Join me on a journey to unleash your potential and create your highest success. Welcome to Business Wealth Impact. Hello and welcome to Business Wealth Impact. Today we have John Follis as our guest. In 4 years, John went from being out of work to being honored at the White House. In the 90s, the Madison Avenue ad agency that he co-founded became one of the most awarded in the country, and his successful ad work has been covered by the New York Times, USA Today, Forbes, Wall Street Journal, CNBC, and a lot of others. John's White House invite was the result of his groundbreaking national TV campaign addressing child abuse. Despite his success, his career did not start out well. In his first 8 years, he was fired 4 times. How he overcame that to achieve his remarkable success is one of the things that he'll be sharing today. Welcome, John.
Hi, John. How are you?
I'm doing amazing. How are you?
I'm awesome.
Great. Okay, you've had such an incredible career. Why don't you share with us how you went from being fired and then getting to the White House?
Okay, it's not a short story, but I'll try to share it as quickly as possible. After getting fired from a number of big agencies in New York, which is not a hard thing to do, by the way. Big ad agencies in New York are very competitive, and they're kind of notorious for terminating people. An agency could lose an account, and they will have to cut staff. So that's not hard to do. But I realized the other thing, Jean, is I was not a very political person, and I didn't work well with the corporate politics. So that's when I decided to pivot. Instead of looking for a staff job, I decided to try to find some freelance work, which I felt would kind of protect me from having to deal with the political that goes on. And that's when my career really turned around, because once I started doing that, I started connecting with some interesting people. I started getting some really good work produced, and that attracted a guy who was a sales guy who loved my work and said, gee, I think based on your work and my salesmanship, we can really start an ad agency. I think we can pick up some business. So that's what happened. That's how the agency started. And then very quickly, because he was really good at sales and I was really good at creating the work, our agency just exploded. We were one of the fastest growing agencies in New York and started winning all kinds of creative awards. So that's kind of the nutshell of what happened.
And then you got to the White House because of the child abuse campaign.
Right.
Okay, so what was that campaign?
That was a campaign that ran on national TV that the NBA, this was during the NBA playoffs. And the NBA had cut a deal with the National Organization for Child Abuse that basically allowed them $5 million worth of their TV time during the playoff games to run some commercials. The organization just needed an ad agency to produce these commercials. So a lot of it had to do, Jean, with luck. We just happened to meet them right after they had gotten this deal with the NBA, which was maybe a month and a half before the NBA playoffs. And that year, 28 million people were watching the NBA playoffs. So my commercials, the commercials that I created, I had about 2 weeks to come up with these commercials, which was kind of crazy, but came up with 3 commercials that ran probably 4 or 5 times during each game. So a lot of people got to see them, and I still don't know exactly how I got invited to the White House, but I think it was because the president at the time, George Bush, saw the commercials. And at the time, the White House had this program called 1,000 Points of Light. And the whole idea was behind that was that they felt it was important to acknowledge people in America who were doing good things. And so all I can assume is that the president saw the commercials, were captivated by them, and called one of his assistants and said, "Find out who's doing the spots. We got to get him to the White House." I don't really know, but I
Okay.
was one of maybe 24 people
Hmm.
of that year who was honored at a White House reception because of the work that was done.
Congratulations for that. A bit late. And I love what you said about luck. Okay, we always hear we have to do the work, and we do have to do the work as business owners. Obviously, you've done a lot of work, but not many people do acknowledge. I mean, I think when I'm reading business books, they do acknowledge that there was some luck. How much luck came into your success?
Well, let me respond to that. That's true what you said, but I think successful people have a way of creating their own luck.
Hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
You can be just you could find a $100 bill on the sidewalk. That's luck.
Hmm.
But if you look at any business people who are successful and luck is involved, that if you kind of connect the dots, I think you'll find that not in every case, but in most cases, they did things that put them in a position to be lucky. Do you know what I'm
Mhm.
saying?
I do know what you're saying. There is a little bit of dumb luck, and some people have admitted that some of it they feel it was just dumb luck. Yours was not dumb luck. This is stuff that you did to put you in a position. I think you're correct on that because I think a lot about luck, and I don't think much of it is dumb luck. I think there's something you've created. Okay, so what are some things in your various careers? Because you went and you were telling me before that you had to go from the other era into a digital era. And you were telling me how you transitioned almost by accident. Why don't you tell that story? Because that
Yeah.
was also some luck, right?
Well, it wasn't multiple careers, but it was an evolution
Mm,
of my advertising career because I'm 70. I started out in the 80s in the ad business, but as the media landscape changed in the 90s,
mm,
um, unlike a lot of my peers, I really paid attention to it. You kind of like what AI is now. I
mhm,
speak to a lot of people. They don't know what AI is. They don't really want to know. They don't get involved with it. Um, Kind of like the internet
mm,
in the early 90s. And my first website went up in late 95.
mhm,
So even though I didn't fully understand the internet at the time, I kind of thought it was going to be something I had to pay attention to.
mhm,
And toward the late 90s, as I was doing a lot of networking, John, I would meet people, small business owners, who, of course, would ask you what you do. And when I mentioned the A word, I call it the advertising word, they would say, "Oh, that's nice," and then they'd excuse themselves and get another drink. So I realized that smaller business owners at that time really didn't have the budgets. They heard the word advertising, they thought of
mm,
media-based advertising. They didn't have big advertising budgets, but what they did have was a need and a desire to figure out how to market themselves. So this is when websites were getting to the next stage, and blogs were kind of a new thing, and Google was just starting up, and Facebook was new, and all this stuff. And they were overwhelmed with trying to figure out how to navigate that.
mm,
So that's when I realized that I couldn't really call myself an advertising guy to this demographic. I had to talk in terms of marketing,
mhm,
and it really was. What started it was a phone call I got out of the blue from a woman who was looking for some consulting help. I didn't do it at the time, but she kind of begged me to do it. And I figured, well, let me just give her a dollar amount that she probably can't afford, an hourly rate, because I didn't think that was a good business model, working time for money. I was working with clients who had retainers and
mm,
project fees, things like that. But I threw out an hourly rate, 250 an hour. This was in 2004, and I figured, if she doesn't want to do it, fine. It's not worth my time to do it less than that. And she said yes. It kind of surprised me, and
mhm,
that started. And when I met with her, Jean, it was for an hour, and for the first 15 minutes, she was basically just pouring her heart out to me and talking about, it was a very emotional experience where she was talking about her business like it was a child,
mm,
and I felt like a therapist. So at the end of that hour, I gave her about an extra 10 minutes of advice. And she said, "Well, we have to meet again." And when she went down the elevator, my Park Avenue condo, I thought to myself, this could be a new business model. And if it is, how do I brand it? What do I call it? I didn't want to just say Follis Consulting.
Mm.
But because I felt like a therapist and we were talking about marketing, I said, I got a great idea, marketing therapy.
Mm.
And at that point, I started working on my own brand of marketing therapy. And that turned out to be a very successful business model because I did that for the next 15 years. And this was, like I said, 2004, when you couldn't do a face-to-face thing like this, but you could do via Skype. You could
Mhm.
share your audio, talk in real time, and share your screen.
Mm.
So a lot of out of the conversations came projects, specific projects, whether it be a radio ad, or a lot of clients had needed a tagline or something like that. Then I
Mhm.
could give them a proposal for the project. They didn't
Mhm.
have to use me, but most cases they did.
Mm.
So that initial consulting turned into multiple projects for
That's interesting.
clients.
So you were doing the consulting, but then you would get gigs from them that they actually had projects for you as well.
It's true in many businesses, especially if you're doing marketing, because I think so many business owners get bamboozled by
Mhm.
marketing people who
Mhm.
come off as really good. I've got this system, this magical bullet, this system. Just use my system, and you're going to
Mhm.
make $1 million, right?
Mhm.
Well, my approach was every business is different, and what works for
Mhm.
one business may not work for another business.
Mm.
And once they started talking to me and
Mhm.
investing an hour or two of one-on-one like this, I think it enabled them to have a comfort level where they could trust me
Mhm.
and really believe that I could help them.
Mhm.
So once they had that foundation, they were much more open when I suggested, I think you need a tagline. I
Mm.
think you need to take your website up to another level.
Mhm.
Whatever it is you need to do, they say, okay, well, how do I do that? That's when I would offer them a proposal.
Mhm.
This is what it will cost. This is how long it will take.
Mhm.
And you don't have to use me, but this is how I can help you.
Interesting. Great model and great pivot that you did. And I love what you said that she begged you to do that. If people are begging you, sign that you're
Yeah.
the market, but please will you help me? So that was a good sign. So tell me, what are some of the things? Because one of the reasons why you're on podcast, you were sharing with me, was to just give back and help people with the knowledge that you have. So what are some of those things that you've learned that you would love to impart to people listening right now?
Well, just the things we're talking about right now, I think
Mm.
are helpful, especially, I'm a marketing person. So, as you just pointed out, the essence of marketing is not to be knocking on people's doors. That's
Mm.
selling.
Mm.
Effective marketing is about people finding out about you through their own means. Just about, the reason I'm talking to you,
Mhm.
John, is because you found out about me. Your assistant found out about me. I didn't ask to be on the show.
Mm.
I have nothing to sell.
Mhm.
Um, so that's the essence of good marketing, is figuring out ways to uh, put the right message in front of the right audience at the right time
Mm.
in a way that initiates a response from them. This woman who called me because she heard me give a presentation. She had
Mm.
seen my work in New York, seen my ads, was impressed, and she was also referred to me by someone. So those were like three points.
Mm.
This is why, and especially when I said I don't know if I want to work with you, I think that just made her want to work with me more. Because
Mhm.
I was honest with her. I was very ambivalent.
Mm.
So I think that's an important point for if your audience is trying to figure out how to market themselves.
Mhm.
That's what good marketing in essence does. It makes your target audience want to come to you.
Mm. Okay, so what are some big fails that you've had that you learned a lot from in your business career?
Oh, that's a good question. Um, something, I don't really look at. I could say, well, I got fired 4 times. Those were failures,
Mm.
right?
Right.
Um, but I don't look at it that way. Had I not gotten fired those times,
Mm.
I would have not made a decision to pivot and go solo and start freelancing, and try to find people who really were able to appreciate my talent.
Mhm.
So I could say those firings were failures,
Mhm.
but they were able to get me to the point that I am now, not having to worry about making money.
Right. Right. Okay, so in this digital age and with AI and everything, what's your advice for people to stand out? Because there is a lot of noise now. It's not like when when the internet was quite new and then ads were quite new and they everything was working then. There was one point where you could just stick any ad up on Facebook ads and somebody would buy it. Remember those days? So
Really?
oh, yeah, there was a point even Russell Brunson was saying in the early days when he was first creating funnels himself, coding them, he said you everything got clicked on because there weren't that many people advertising at the very
Okay.
beginning, the early
Okay.
adopters. Now there's many more people, much more competition. So what's your advice now for people to stand out?
Well, you can't. I don't give general advice
Mm,
because, like I said earlier, I think the mistake that a lot of marketing people make is they come up with advice that might work really well for a number of businesses, but not so well for another business. So it really depends on what your business is. But and you have to pay attention to where the marketing landscape is going. And like I said to you earlier, I got involved with the internet before a lot of people knew what the internet was. I had a website up in late '95 when it was just in its earliest stages. But I could see that it was something that would be
mm,
important moving forward. What's true, what's comparable to that right now is AI. So I think you'd be foolish not to begin to educate yourself,
mm,
regardless of what kind of business you're in, about AI, because if you don't, your
mhm,
competition is, and it's not going away. So I think it's important to continue, again, regardless of whatever
mhm,
business, just as a general statement. It's not a marketing solution, but it's just a kind of way of running a business. You have to pay attention to trends. I think that's one
mhm,
of the things that enabled me to be successful. When I talked about pivoting in the late '90s and getting
mhm,
involved in uh, via Skype, doing
mhm,
this sort of thing. I also started podcasting. I had one of the earliest podcasts in early 2006. I don't know if you know this,
mhm,
but I was learning about podcasting. A lot of people think podcasting started with the pandemic. It
mm,
actually started in late 2005. And in 2006, I had a podcast that was doing what you're doing. So
yeah,
I think the more for anyone who's
mhm,
involved in a business, you have to uh, keep
mm,
keep your fingers on the pulse of the trends, because AI is going to affect everything, every business. How you apply that to your business is a whole
mhm,
nother thing. But
mm,
start learning about what you could do, how you might be able to incorporate AI.
mhm.
That would be one thing I would suggest.
I completely agree. I'm continually researching AI. I've joined AI centric groups that are cutting edge. I'm always thinking, all of us are thinking, how do we apply this to the maximum? I think we're all on, ChatGPT and Claude and using it. I'm certainly using it in certain ways, but I think it's that other people are using it. How are they doing it? And I'm continually meeting with AI companies just to see their demos and see what's going on. So I completely 100% agree about keeping your finger on the pulse and your ear to the ground so you're not left behind. Not out of fear, just because you're interested in what's going on in the world and marketing. So what is some of the mindset behind your success? People, mindset's huge now as a word, mindset, but people are always doing mindset. What was the mindset that you feel you had that made you successful?
Well, I had a strong desire to be the best
Mm,
at what I did. I grew up in Connecticut. I know you worked in New York. I worked in New York, but growing up in Connecticut, I was kind of grew up in the sticks of Connecticut. So even though the place to be if you were in advertising was New York, I had to work my way up to it.
mm,
But I knew that if I wanted to be the best, even though I was intimidated by it, s- at some point I had to get to New York. I felt I was going to get my ass kicked probably if I did that, because I'm not a city guy, and you really have to have a thick skin. I mean, you lived in New York, you know what I'm talking about. So I thought I might get my ass kicked if I did, and I did get my ass kicked. But I knew that I had to get out of my comfort zone. I think one of the things, if you're going to be successful, you have to do things that get you out of your comfort zone a little bit. I was very shy, for example, and I knew that my shyness was probably going to work against me, especially in a place like New York. So you'll appreciate this. One of the things I did was take an acting class. And there was a class called Acting for Non-Actors. I said, that's perfect. And I convinced a buddy of mine to do it with me. So I had a wingman with me, because I was scared to do this acting class. And it was taught at HB Studios. Do you know HB
Yes,
Studios?
I do. Yes.
That's where Al Pacino and
Uta Hagen.
Lee Strasberg, I think.
Yes.
So, one of the best in the country. So me and my buddy took this acting class. I also took a public speaking course called Toastmasters, because I felt, especially if I'm going to be out there trying to promote my business, I have to get as many speaking gigs as possible. So those are just a couple examples of getting out of my comfort zone to succeed. But I was willing to do that because I really wanted to be successful. I wanted to be the best at what I did. And every time I got fired, I used that as motivation. You know what I'm saying? I wanted to prove that they made a mistake. So I would use what might have been perceived as setbacks as motivation.
So interesting, because I was also very shy. And when I was 17, I found Psycho-Cybernetics. You know that book by Maxwell Maltz, the self-image psychology. I found that in my dad's library. It was out of print. Now it's being reprinted. And I remember I thought the same thing. I thought me being this shy isn't helping me. And I actually got into acting as part of conquering that. So we have that in common. Well, that is very interesting. And the mindset there is that you saw what was going on and you were determined to get where you wanted to go, and you were determined to do whatever it took to get you out of that. So, and I agree, it's not a little bit out of the comfort zone. We have to get a lot out of our comfort zones. That was way out of your comfort zone. And I know you're just being humble there, but that probably, well, you said you were scared to death. I feel like people want everything to be comfortable. We just want it to be comfortable and easy. But that ease is not what drives us towards success, right? Ultimately.
Yeah, and some people have it and some people don't. Where I got my ambition, I don't really know. My dad was a successful business guy. So, I got to experience hearing him talk about his business growing up. So, that might have had something to do with it. But I also, I think I'm kind of a rebellious guy. So, I got knocked down a lot. The first advertising course I took at Syracuse, I did not get along with the instructor. And with 3 weeks left to go in the course, he pulled me aside and said, "You're pretty clueless, and I'm going to give you a choice: either drop the class, or you're going to get the grade I give you, and you're not going to be happy about it. What do you want to do?" And I needed to do well, not just complete the course, but do well in that course in order to graduate. And either one of those options appealed to me, but I ended up dropping the course. Fortunately, I was able to take the same course with a different instructor, and I did very well with it. But that's just an example of getting knocked down and using that as motivation. So because that happened so early, even before my career started, I think I had kind of a chip on my shoulder that I felt like I really wanted to prove myself. And I think deep down, I have to say, deep down, I really believed in myself and my talent. Growing up, the one skill that I really had was my artistic skill, my creative abilities. My mom was an art teacher. So from my earliest memories, she would really reinforce whenever I did something artistic. So I knew that I was good creatively, and I just felt, as I progressed in my career, that I really had something to prove,
Mm,
to showcase that work.
mm. That's a lovely story. Well, John, this has been a really lovely chat with you. What's something that you want to leave the listeners with as far as mindset or philosophy?
I would just encourage people, if they're serious about their business, and being successful in their business, is to um, never stop learning, never stop trying to gain insight and gain wisdom from people like maybe some of the people who've been on your show and other podcasts.
Mm,
I mean, it's never been easier right now. I mean, when I started out, there was no internet, so you couldn't just click on something and listen to a conversation like this. But now there's really no excuse, not to learn and gain wisdom and inspiration from people who could say things that could really supercharge
mm.
your career.
That is so true. And I agree. It's no excuse not to get knowledge now. Well, thank you so much, John, again, for coming on and sharing your wisdom and your story. And thank you, everybody, for listening. I hope I see you on the next one. Please share, subscribe, and keep listening. You're listening to the Business Wealth Impact Podcast, your source for empowering information and cutting-edge ideas from the world's top minds. I'm your host, Jean Amlour, founder of seven-figure coaching company, Jean Amlour International. Join me on a journey to unleash your potential and create your highest success. Welcome to Business Wealth Impact.